Hello, Mr. Pattinson here. By now you know some of the properties that clay possesses. You know that it's soft and pliable when it's fresh, and you know that it dries out and becomes harder. You know that it can be fired in the kiln and made permanent. Well, we want to take advantage of each of those physical properties. We want to work with the clay when it's soft and pliable, and we want it to hold its shape when it's finished. In order to do that, we often need to use something called an armature. An armature can be many things, and today I'd like to show you maybe 3 or 4. If we're going to consider human form, human ceramic form and sculptural form, it's necessary to think about an internal support. An armature is an internal support, and in some cases, it comes out before your ceramic piece is fired. In other cases, it's consumed in the kiln. It just gets burned out. I'll show you some examples of each of these kinds of armatures in this short video. I've gathered some materials from around the house. I have a plastic container. It's pretty sturdy. There's no give in that, and there's no give in this one either. These are obviously the kinds of armatures that will be removed before the clay goes into the kiln. I have newspaper, a paper towel roll, some fresh clay. I have scissors and tape and some paper towels. We'll need this kind of stuff if we're going to experiment with armatures. A very simple armature can be made from crumpled newspaper. Newspaper works pretty well because it's completely flammable. It burns out in the kiln. We don't have to worry about getting it out. It also has a certain compression to it, and that means that as our clay begins to dry, it's going to shrink. And as it shrinks, it puts pressure on the armature, and if there's some compression there, we don't have to worry about getting it out at any particular time. A simple paper armature like this is completely crushable, and it can be shaped any which way you like. You can also combine different armatures together. So using a little bit of tape. With a little bit of tape, we have a shell and a head. You might see that this could easily become a turtle, for example. You can remove this and it can become a human face. Certainly, if you've taken grade 9 visual arts, you used an armature like this to make your mask. If we're making a mask with this armature, you would roll a sufficient slab of 1 centimeter thick clay, perhaps, and simply drape it over the form. So it gets shaped on top of the newspaper, and eventually the newspaper is removed. Okay, so it'll look something like this as you begin to push and shape the face. The armature never goes away. It's always right there. These forms are hard plastic, so they're less forgiving. That means that I can use these as armatures, but I have to get them out before the clay is fired, and in fact, before the clay shrinks and tightens down on them. You're going to think this is all a setup, but it's not. As I was sourcing material for this, look at this, in my blue bin. If we're talking about human form, there's my Palmolive dish soap container in the blue bin, and it seems to have a human form. Angular, perhaps more masculine, heavier shoulders, and gentle curves. I found a couple. For this next part, you'll need some newspaper and each of the forms that you plan on using as an armature. Here's how it all begins. You take your newspaper and cut it into reasonable shapes. Then you pause for a minute and read the Dilbert cartoon. After a brief chortle, take some of this newspaper and just wrap it around. This part can be done very quickly and with less precision than more. All you need to do is create that separation between the hard form and the clay that is going to contact the hard form. The newspaper doesn't provide any definition to the shape that's going to be on the outside of your sculpture, so you can work quickly at this point, rapidly forming the shell of the newspaper around the form. It's not an issue at all. I'm actually using some elastic bands. to capture some of the form of this curvier bottle. Remember, the Palmolive bottle had sort of gentle curves about it, and I want to use those curves in the sculpture as it evolves. So I'll capture them with newspaper and rubber band. So I have a real little family starting to emerge here, but this bottle is going to make a different point. It has the same hard plastic core that the other two have, but I'm going to combine it with another form. The process begins the same way. I wrap using newspaper, some masking tape, and perhaps a rubber band or two. Working rapidly, shaping, and capturing the essential form. You can see that there is a neck that starts to emerge because of the cap of the bottle. The shape of the bottle asserts that much of the human form. But I'm also going to reach over and grab that paper ball that was the turtle's head in the previous example. It's completely consumable. There's no internal structure, it's just newspaper, so I can tack that on, knowing that it will burn up in the kiln. A little bit of masking tape will hold this in place. It might flop around a little bit, but I only need it temporarily. It gives the top part of my armature some definition. So now we have the consumable newspaper armature combined with the hard plastic removable armature, and we'll call this a hybrid because parts of it are not recoverable. That's the way it goes. I can continue to mold this until I am satisfied with the shape. I'll play around with this a little bit longer and then stop. Okay, so hard plastic removable armature. A removable armature combined with a consumable armature in a hybrid armature. And we're going to look at one more kind of armature too, an external armature, something that supports the weight of the clay while you're working on it from the outside. That blob of clay that's been in the shot all video is simply a base for the paper towel roll that will hold something, a head, a torso, or a full body from the inside. So this kind of armature is an external armature. We can recycle the parts again later for another project. That's it for armatures for now. Remember, with armatures, it's what's on the inside that counts.